Welcome to Inspire, the Angel Flores podcast, where you'll be inspired, equipped, and entertained.
All right, Karen, thank you for doing this. Thanks for agreeing to come on. So you and I met, well, you know my wife through the work you do at the Pregnancy Resource Center. Mm-hmm. And I know your son through Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so I had him on a few episodes back, and his episode was I went from being a drug addict to being a business owner. And he's a very well-respected business owner and good friend of mine. And so now we are connected, and I'm excited to have you on. So thanks for coming on. Just a real quick overview. You work at the Pregnancy Resource Center,
yes,
helping women who are dealing with many times unplanned pregnancies. Is that
yes,
a fair statement?
That's correct.
Yeah. And so that's often, as everybody joining us would know, it's sometimes a traumatic event and a scary time. And
yes, it is. And I appreciate being able to talk about this because it's a touchy subject.
For sure, yeah.
And it's kind of divisive, but I think it's a place that is really begging for truth and wisdom, and that's what we have to offer. So I'm really thankful to do this.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's not just politically divisive, although it really is. I mean, it's if you want to touch a political hot button,
that's the one.
The right to abortion or pro-life, pro-choice is huge political hot button. But it's also a polarizing, even in church communities, and so, I'm excited to talk about this. And let's start out. Let's hear a little bit of your story. Okay. Where are you from? Where are you born? That kind of stuff.
All right. So I was born in kind of a utopian type of community. I was born in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and grew up in Los Alamos, New Mexico.
Okay.
And Los Alamos is it's where they developed the atomic bomb.
Right.
It's up in the mountains, about 7,500 feet. Beautiful place in the Jemez Mountains, and but the community itself was very unique.
It's about 2 hours from Albuquerque, hour and a half.
That's right.
Okay.
If you stop and think about it, when they first developed it, they brought scientists from all over the world,
mm-hmm.
and because of the war,
right.
And only the brightest and the best were invited. So we didn't have any poor, we didn't have any handicapped, we didn't have.
Interesting.
It was this really special community, and everybody was there for one goal. They all were working together.
Mm-hmm.
So like even in the early days, the scientists.
This was like in the 40s.
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The scientists would work together, and they would develop the ski hill and the skating rink, and everybody knew everybody else.
Interesting, yeah.
And for years, the director, Bradbury was his last name. My dad he said, nobody's better than anybody else. You may be a physicist, or you may be, not the grunt, but the guy that's doing whatever. But
blue collar stuff.
Yeah, we're all working together,
Interesting.
My dad developed dry boxes for working with plutonium. So, it was a great day and age to come of age,
mm-hmm.
but living in that community, it was just very special and unique. And
is it a military base?
No,
it's not, but it's a secure facility for sure.
It was.
Right.
It used to be when we first moved there. There was a gate at the front, and you had to, if somebody came to visit you, you had to go down and give them clearance to come in.
Okay.
But now it's all open.
Okay.
It's turned into a lot. There's a lot of discoveries that are made there. That's where they developed the laser.
Oh, wow.
Years ago, that does so much.
So they just get all of these scientists and physicists and engineers, put them together. And of course, the atomic bomb came out of that.
Right. They worked
but
really
also,
hard to.
These guys are working on a lot of stuff and probably sharing ideas and developing. Right. Interesting.
Right. So it was a really safe place. My mom would send us down to the store. We would walk down to the store for, a mile or whatever. I mean, there was just so many great things about it, but I don't think it set me up well for reality.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
But anyway, it was as a girl, it was lots of fun. It was kind of a delight. We did baseball and softball and all the sports, and all the dads were the coaches, and it was just a really great community. How many siblings? Pardon?
How many siblings do you have?
I have one sister and two brothers.
Okay. And where do you fall?
Third of four. Yeah. So, anyway, we attended First Baptist Church there. We were very faithful in going. And so I grew up in the church.
Okay.
Thinking back, I guess I think I just was very naive. I missed the birds and the bees talk.
Okay.
From, my older brother and sister got it.
All right.
And my sister says my brother said, "Shh, don't ask any questions. Let's just get this over with." I don't know. I wasn't there, but
I mean, it was a different time for sure.
Yeah, it was. And I heard a saying the other day that's ignorance is not an excuse, but it can be an explanation. And I really appreciated that because looking back, I think, man, I think I was just happy-go-lucky. The hard part for me was in Los Alamos, if you got math and science, you fit in.
Oh, gotcha.
And I did not. I struggled really badly. And now when I went to college, it clicked. I had a really good professor. But growing up, I just felt like, so I was the cute little cheerleader and everybody loved me, well, because you do that. If you don't fit in here, you try something else. So right or wrong, that's kind of the way it was.
That was your story. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my story.
So a little bit of a performer, that kind of personality, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I knew my dad loved me. I never, ever doubted that. But I felt like he was disappointed because he would try to teach me we laugh because he would try to teach me to tell time, like in 5th grade. Well, he would move the hands on the clock and he would explain it and I just couldn't get it. Well, now we laugh because that clock he used, it had this little face that opened. There were no numbers. There were just lines.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And so we're like, "Daddy, what were you doing?" And we laugh about it now.
Yeah.
Eventually
I learned. It was so obvious to him,
right?
But he probably learned with a clock with numbers.
Exactly.
Funny, yeah.
And I was really trying hard and So anyway, just little things like that kind of made me who I was, I guess.
So I
was a
graduated from high school?
I did.
What high school?
Los Alamos
High School?
Yeah.
What was their mascot? Home of the...
Hilltoppers.
Okay.
Because we're way up in the mountains. Yeah. It was like a top hat and a cane. It wasn't like an animal or anything.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, the Toppers.
Not like the Bombers or...
The Bombers are in Hanford.
Really? So that really is
They are. Yeah.
Okay.
During the Manhattan Project, there were 7 national labs, and one of them is in Hanford. Our daughter lives up there now.
Wow.
And
is that in New Mexico also?
No, that's Washington State.
Oh, okay. The Bombers.
Yeah, the Bombers, yeah.
Oh.
So.
Okay. Interesting. So then you graduate high school?
So but I dated a guy throughout high school that I fell in love with. And we went through some big things together. His dad died when we were juniors.
Oh, wow.
We were very close. Through high school, we got involved a little bit, heavy petting, things like that. But we got to stop, that type of thing.
Right.
And I went to college. After I graduated, I went to Eastern New Mexico University for the first semester. And at Christmas, I went home. He had gone to Kansas to work on the farm. I went home and spent
How far
Christmas.
Is Eastern New Mexico from where you were at?
Portales, it's 3 or 4 hours, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. So I went home for the Christmas break and spent Christmas with my sister and parents and younger brother. And then they were going to go to the Rose Bowl parade. And, invited me to go, but I had a ride to go see Scott in Kansas, and his brother was going there. And of course, I really, really missed him and wanted to go there.
Right.
So went and surprised him, went for the weekend. We didn't sleep together at night, but we did have time alone, and that's when I got pregnant.
Okay.
Went back to school and kind of noticed some changes, bodily changes, and I was like, okay.
Something's happening.
Yeah, what's going on here?
So you're how old at this time? 18, 19?
Let's see, I was 18.
18, okay.
Yeah. So I was clueless. I went down the hall in the dorm, and there was a commons area where some girls were sitting there, and I didn't really even know the girls. I had my own private room, so I didn't have a roommate to talk to. And of course, I was scared. And if you tell, then people know you had sex.
Oh, right.
Well, you don't want to tell anybody.
And that might not seem like a big deal today.
Right.
But let me tell you, like in a more conservative time, in a more conservative culture, where you don't have access to the internet, so you don't have any information about like how do you figure out what's happening?
Mm-hmm.
It's a very, very different time. And I think,
Right.
I hope people get that. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and to disappoint the family, the community, the parents, all that
Right.
it was big. And I was pretty selfish. I was pretty self-centered in what I wanted to do. And it's kind of all about me, type
right,
of thing.
lots of 18-year-olds are.
Yeah.
Lots of us are.
So
What were you
when
studying?
At that point, it was special education.
Okay.
Yeah. I ended up getting a 2-year degree to help with Down syndrome kids,
Oh, wow. Okay.
which never came to fruition. But
Right. You have to go aim at something. Yeah.
yes, that's
So you
right.
walk down the hall, you talk to these girls.
Yeah, and this one girl said, "Well, you just go down to such and such a street. They'll take care of you." I don't remember a lot.
So
but
did you know you were pregnant? You had figured that
Well,
out?
I thought I had to have been,
Okay.
and I didn't know what that really meant or was like.
Mhm.
So I went to this. I called Scott and told him I thought I was pregnant and that I wanted him to come down, and he came down. We went to this clinic. I don't even remember if it was a doctor's office, if it was Planned Parenthood. It isn't the memory, so traumatic. I
Right.
don't remember so much. But I do remember we got out of the car and started to walk, and he put his foot out in front of me and he said, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And I couldn't answer. I just nodded my head. So I went in and they obviously did a pregnancy test, and I went to the back room, and this is the only thing I remember is there was a little counter table with something over here with a canister, and I saw blood going into it. It was a suction, I guess. From what I know now, it had to have been. And I went to the recovery room, and there were other girls there, and it was silent. And
How many other girls?
yeah,
Do you remember?
the girls said anything.
Do you remember how many girls were in there?
No, I don't.
You had to have been in a daze.
Yes, and I remember holding on like white knuckle tight, so it had to have hurt.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't remember anything else. I remember anything that they said. I know that I believe the lie of a clump of tissue, and I know in my head I do. God brought this back to me because I've often thought, okay, Lord, do I need to remember more or what? But I remember thinking, well, until it takes a breath. And that's kind of like the naivety,
Yeah.
and that was before ultrasound. They didn't do ultrasounds then. They didn't have them yet. And that really changed the ball game in a really good way when they came out with ultrasound.
You can see the child. Yeah.
Yeah. So Scott drove me back to the dorm.
Was Scott in there with you, or was he
No.
in the waiting room?
He was in the waiting room, yeah. He left, and we didn't talk again for quite some time. A mass majority, break up with their boyfriend or whatever after an abortion.
Right. I could understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was over. I went on my merry way thinking life was good.
Dealt with it.
Well, didn't deal with it. Just
No, but I mean, like, you dealt with the problem, right? You're like,
Right.
that's dealt with, and
yeah.
nobody knows. So did you ever tell your parents, or nobody?
No.
Okay.
I still think about telling my dad. My mom passed on in 2015. And my dad and I have talked a little bit about the subject. But I hope to do that. He's 91, so I need to do it sometimes.
I mean,
Anyway. So that was in February. And by June, I had moved to Southern California to work for the summer.
okay.
There weren't many jobs in Los Alamos. And lived with my sister. And I met the guy that I would marry, my husband. Married him a year later in
How'd
July.
you guys meet?
In church.
Okay.
He was my blonde hair, blue-eyed knight in shining armor. I think I was looking for that. But yeah, we met in Sunday school. It was probably a knee-jerk reaction, but he was answering all the questions. He knew the Bible well, and I think I felt like that's what I need. My dad was definitely a strong Christian man, and I think that's the way I felt, which I haven't, it's been really good, but
They say you marry your father.
yeah,
Like
that's
in
right.
some
in some ways.
Some ways, yeah. So I
Yeah.
can see that.
So then we moved, we married in July and we moved to Colorado in August or September
Mm-hmm.
and got pregnant right away, started having kids. And through a series of circumstances, I figured out kind of what abortion was and what I had done.
Mm.
And I was horrified. And that's when the real work and the hard stuff began. It was very, very difficult. I just could not believe the truth of it. There was a movie that came out called The Silent Scream.
Okay.
There's a man, Dr. Bernard Nathanson, who, when ultrasound came out, he was doing abortions. And then he realized what he was doing and he quit.
When he was able to see
yeah.
ultrasound. Wow.
And he wrote a book and all sorts of things. But it's only like an 11-minute movie/video.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard to watch, but the instruments go in and the baby kind of screams before it gets killed. And so, nobody else knew that I had done this. And we went to a friend's house to watch this. And I thought, okay, that baby's not the only one that is silent screaming because I'm dying inside.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, it was so hard. And that was true as the church was silent for such a long time. And then they woke up and started screaming and were shooting abortion doctors, and all of that.
Which is not the answer. Yeah.
No, it's not. But I think, the part of the thing was I was so miserable. I felt like I had to do something. And when I first met my husband, I didn't tell him. Big mistake.
Mm-hmm.
So after we were married a while, I told him.
So did you ever circle back with the baby's father or?
Yes, I did. Yeah. He was very kind and said, well, I was kind of, messed up at the time and we probably wouldn't have worked, because my thing was I should have not done that, but I also should have married him, to make it all better.
Right. Yeah.
Thinking that you can still make things all better. And that's not life. That comes into the way I was raised and trained me for reality.
Mm-hmm. Trying to,
that's
two wrongs don't make a right necessarily.
Exactly. Yeah. So anyway, when I told my husband, he didn't really want me to talk about it.
Okay.
He was...
That night you told him when you watched that video?
No, he knew before.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he knew before.
So when was he there watching it too?
Yes.
So he had to have known that this was killing you inside.
He did and he didn't. He was pretty hardened.
Okay.
He said, I asked him just the other day, do you remember? And he didn't remember a lot. He was angry, which is a man's go-to.
Sure, yeah.
But he was also just saddened, very saddened. And so it was years. And then it was a Right to Life Sunday. And after the sermon, he said to me, God's told me that I'm really standing in the way of your healing.
Wow.
I tell you what, the floodgates opened. I just could not quit sobbing that Sunday morning. I was just, because I needed, that so much. And so that was really a great turning point for me. I was able to talk to an older lady that kind of mentored me and tell her about it. And I think I told you the other day, she reached across the table and patted my hand and she said, it's going to be okay. And that was, back when I couldn't even get the A word out. It was just like, you're just so sick about it. But she said, it's going to be okay. And that was very, very encouraging. Two other things. One was I worked with the youth staff and for about 15 years, and we had a retreat, and everybody was supposed to bring something to the table, to about themselves, and we were going to try to go deeper with the Lord. Well, I thought, okay, I'll tell these people. So we were sitting in a circle.
So this is the youth staff of the church, working with the young people at your church. Okay,
that's correct. So I told my story, and it was silent.
Yeah.
But my best friend, who had marched at the Capitol, gone to the march at the Capitol against abortion, got up, walked across the circle, and just hugged me. And that was really great. After that, I've done a few things, talked in Sunday school. I was at a women's retreat and did a cardboard testimony, where you walk across the stage, cardboard testimony. And one other place. And every time when I was finished, I felt like a magnet because women would just kind of flock to me. Several women would come right up to me and talk. And I thought, this need is huge.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm so thankful to come today, because it is a huge need. And I feel like we've got to open up that conversation because we do have so much of what women need. And the thing that it's like a grace and truth thing. So the church has got to stand against abortion. It's wrong. Corporately, we have to say, no, the enemy is after God's image.
Right.
And he is killing, God's image. So corporately, we have to do that. But individually, we've got to offer that grace and that forgiveness and that compassion.
Yes.
And it's not pity. We need to listen to their story. We need to love them and show them compassion. We also need to help them through that healing process. Because it really is a process.
Yes.
There's so much involved in it. So many different parts and pieces. When we talk about the forgiveness piece, it's, multifaceted. Like for me, nobody knew. It falls here. I'm the one, I can't blame my parents for making me do it.
Right.
I can't blame my boyfriend for making me do it. But there are a lot of stories that have all these other pieces. And so when we talk about forgiveness, we go into a lot of the details, like forgiving the doctors, forgiving the people that lied to you, me forgiving those girls that I don't remember who they were, that sent me, because it's all in there and you carry around those burdens, those rocks, and that makes it heavy instead of giving it to the Lord and letting it go and actually working through that forgiveness piece.
It's such a perfect picture of Jesus saying, my yoke is easy and my burden is light.
Yes.
So take my yoke upon you, right? So there's this, in the Bible, those that might not be familiar, there's this picture of Jesus is talking about the yoke that oxen wear, and it's this heavy yoke that they carry around, and it's kind of how they're controlled and steered. Jesus says that we all wear one. It's just the fact of life. We all have the weight of life on us. Jesus says, I'll trade you. Mine is light. Yours is heavy. I'll carry yours. But so often the weight of it all is too much. And so it's hard to hand it over to the Lord because of shame, because of guilt, because of, I blame myself. I whatever, right? But yeah, that's exactly what you're describing is that, and it happens it's a process. I wish I could say it happens in one big moment. And maybe for some people it does. But the average person, there's this handing off, taking back, handing off, taking back. And it's a process. Yeah.
And the weight of it all is a really good description, because a big thing is actually accepting Christ's forgiveness, because it's such a horrible sin. And I know sin is sin.
Right.
I get that.
Yes. But
I felt like I really struggled, and I've read a lot of other people too, that this is just too big. This is, and another friend of mine that really helped me said, you either believe Christ died for all sins or you don't. What do you believe? And, I grew up in the church, so I was like, oh, what do I believe? And I had to really ponder that through. And it was really good for me, because it was like, get down off your high horse, quit being so prideful, and know that you're just like every other human. You sin, and yeah, you did a big one, but Christ died for that. If we don't accept that, that's like slapping him, And that was a
saying
really
your
big
sacrifice wasn't good enough.
Yes. Yeah.
That's good.
And there's other, like Greg, what's his name, that wrote the languages, 5 languages. He's
Gary Chapman.
No, that's the wrong person.
What's his name?
Greg. You're probably right.
5 love languages.
Yeah, that's probably the wrong edit.
What was
Gary Smalley, I want to say.
Uh-huh.
He was going to leave the ministry, because he has abortion in his past, or not go into the ministry because he just thought this is too big. I can't, So it is a really heavy weight. That
do you think that there's also an element? Of course, there's two ways we have to fix stuff in our lives. One is this way with God, up and down. The other one is with people, right?
Yeah.
And so, do you think how much of it do you think is horizontal, where you think maybe someone like Gary saying, I can't go into the ministry because this is really bad between me and God. Also, people are not going to want to have anything to do with me, or you're not going to listen to me, or you're not going to understand.
Right. I think if you're in the church, that's a big deal because you feel like no one understands. They wouldn't get it. And if it's a secret and you bring it out, are you going to be judged?
Right.
Like the Bible says, confess your sins one to another. How often do we do that in the church?
Right.
I think of Matthew West's song, "Truth be told, the truth is seldom told." And so we need to do that more. These girls in the church that are going from the pew on Sunday to the abortion clinic on Monday, that needs to stop. We need to talk about unplanned pregnancies. We need to talk about, getting pregnant before you're married and what should you do and how can we help?
Right. Yes.
But we feel this judgment, and I think a lot of it is parallel. And I think a lot of it
Jesus was an unplanned pregnancy. That's Jesus. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't get any more than Jesus.
Right.
Jesus was an unplanned pregnancy. Jesus, at some point at least, was raised by a single mom. His father died at some point in his life after he was 12. So, yeah, Jesus.
Even Mary and Joseph dealing with that.
Yes.
That was a big deal. Right.
She could have been killed. She could have been stoned to death. But Joseph, he said, "No, we're gonna deal with this, and it's gonna be okay." And
yes.
But yeah, you're right, absolutely right. The stigma of it, the judgment of it, the self condemnation of it all it's a lot.
Yeah.
Mosaics. There's a lot of ways that churches get involved, right? And they're, like you mentioned, some folks in the church have shot abortion doctors. I actually read a guy who did that. I think it was in Colorado Springs, and he wrote this big long blog before he did it.
Oh,
and it was there's no way I'll ever be able to find this or remember his name, but it's been several years. If I can find it, I'll put it in the show notes. But basically what he did is he had two small kids, and he knew that today I'm going to do this thing, and I'm going to prison for the rest of my life, and I'm never going to see my kids again. But in his mind, he weighed that amount of sacrifice against the lives that he thought he would be saving, potentially be saving. So I guess it was like on a Friday. That's when they performed abortions in this clinic. So he laid out in the grass across the street or down the street or whatever. And when the guy got out of his car, he shot him, killed him.
Wow.
And then he stood up and waited for the police to get there and turned himself in. And as I read his blog, I did not agree. I completely disagreed with his approach. But I somewhat understood his logic. He says, I'm saving lives. I get that. I understand what you're saying, but, an eye for an eye makes everyone blind.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And so that's not the answer. But some churches protest, some, there's a lot of different ways, right? So what we do is we participate. We work with you guys and
Right.
We want to be a part of a safe place where women can go and have a sane conversation about their options.
Right.
What's that process like? Walk me through that a little bit.
Okay. So when they come in, we have an advocate that meets with them.
Okay.
Real nice, cozy rooms, and we ask what's going on, what's your story, what brings you in, whatever is going on in their lives, and we really try to listen. Our advocates are trained and very trained, intensely trained, to know what to say, what not to say, how to listen, that type of thing. And then we have nurses that do the pregnancy test.
Okay.
Do
you have RNs there? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. We explain all three options.
All right.
We explain adoption and what that looks like, because modern day adoption is very different than it used to be.
Okay.
We always try to say, to explain to them, it's not the foster system.
Mm-hmm.
That is completely different than adoption. And there's lots of people wanting to adopt a child, lots and lots and lots. But we explain what that looks like, how much you can be involved or not involved. We explain parenting.
Open adoption, closed adoption,
yes.
all that, yeah.
Yes. And then we talk all about parenting and the support that they have through adoption or through parenting. And then we explain abortion. And when we explain abortion, we tell them what it actually is. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of tools. We have a lot of videos, different things that we can show them. And they're not gory, but they do explain the truth. So we're truth tellers. Depending on how far along they are, there's the pill, the suction, the different kinds of abortion. And then we also explain the after effects of all three of them. When you parent, okay, you're going to be parenting it. But
there's a lot of after effects to that.
Yes, there are.
I can testify to that.
and adoption and abortion as well. And then we also give support for all three choices. We know when they leave, they still have a choice of any of those three options. But they know they make that decision based on truth. So if they want to abort, what we try to address is the issue. Because I have said many times, nobody really wants to have an abortion. But a lot of people don't want to be pregnant. Why do you not want to be pregnant? Is your boyfriend mean to you? Do you not? Is it a secret? Your parents don't know you're having sex? Is it?
You're not financially ready. You already have too many kids, whatever.
Exactly. All of the above. Is it naivety? Which the Christian girls that come in, they're like, well, I just want to have an abortion. I'm like, oh, no, you don't. Because they just think the world is telling you, oh, yeah, you just come in and on you go. It's no big deal. And that's just not true. Now, there are women that have had abortions that have gone on with their life. But I think sooner or later, that's my personal opinion, sooner or later.
I agree with you.
So that's kind of the way we go about it. As far as the meetings with the gals that come in, we are offering right now, we're really working on the aftercare ministry.
Okay. Following up with women who have made whatever choice.
Yes.
Okay.
And we're doing that for women of all ages. So the other day I spoke at a church and there was a lady who had an abortion 50 years ago.
Oh my gosh.
And she was, really upset and crying. And so I've talked to her several times. We offer Bible studies, kind of a deep dive Bible study. We can do it one-on-one or we can do it in groups. And then we also offer a video series called Surrendering the Secret. And it's 8 weeks where you watch this group of ladies that are going through the same book that you're going through.
Oh, gotcha. So you're kind of part of a group on the outside watching the conversation.
Yeah, and then our group itself is going through that. And then we just recently started doing a retreat where you come for the whole weekend and everything is at no cost. And that's because of wonderful people like your church that have donated. So you come for the weekend and we go through, it's called Forgiven and Set Free. Lots of object lessons, like the forgiveness piece that I mentioned earlier. We have them gather rocks for each person that's involved that they need to forgive, and they have to carry them around.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Different things like that just to show. And some of those people you're ready to forgive. Others, the ones that hurt you, it might take a little bit. But to watch God work through those scriptures and through that intense time together is amazing. And then we do send them out with a couple of tools, for where to go from here or how to,
Yes, yeah. How do I keep going? Yeah.
The gal that trained me, I love one of the things she said was, every time this comes up and you're getting upset or whatever, she said, you just say, thank you, Satan, for reminding me of all God has done.
How important this work is. Yeah.
Yes. And how wonderful it is that he does provide that forgiveness. And so that's the aftercare. We're doing a lot of different things. Just, we realize that it's her choice to heal. And that's one of the books that we use by Sidney Massey, because it is, you can keep it a secret, you can stay miserable,
Right.
but that
There's
freedom,
a lot of ways to live.
yes,
For sure. Yeah.
and one of the ways that people live is high functioning.
Mm.
When you have
You
that
stuff it.
secret,
You
you
stuff it.
stuff it, and
Yeah.
it bubbles up, and that grieving and that miserableness is there, but you stuff it back down, and we become very high functioning. And I feel like sooner or later, especially believers, God says, we're going to deal with this. And however it comes up or out, they can come to us if they want and choose any of the, we have websites and videos and books and, all those things that I mentioned, the retreats and all that. So we're working on that. We've had some really great stories, but we'd like to see more women. We'll see what God does.
Yeah. So more women. What do you mean?
More women find the hope and healing and walk through the process.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And really discover.
Well, we are going to
that
share
freedom.
all of your resource center stuff and your contact info in our show notes. So if women want to get a hold, man, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of folks that listen to this and men that have been a part of that decision,
right,
and feel marginalized, maybe like, they're kind of in the background, but that man also lost a child.
Exactly.
And that's no small thing. And
so here's the deal with men. Two sides of it. Men whose girlfriend or significant other, whatever, is pregnant, they have been programmed to support whatever choice she makes. I say, no, sir. It's time to man up and do whatever she needs to choose life. And we've told a couple men that.
Very interesting observation. I never thought of it that way, but you're
they
right.
They come in all the time and they go, well, whatever she chooses, because that's what they've been programmed,
by society, but it's her choice. Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah.
So to say, we'll figure this out now, it's she can still abort without.
Right.
But if he will do, and that means a lot of things. It could mean co-parenting, it could mean parenting, it could mean visiting your child who's been adopted. It could mean a lot of different things, but he does.
Just having a man say, here's what I would like, could make all the difference.
Yes.
And I know it's easy for a guy to say because he doesn't have to carry the child and he doesn't have to give birth and all that. But I think there's still something to be said for the man to say, here's what I think. And she can do whatever she likes, but here's what I think.
And that support for after the baby's born. I will be there. I will be the dad. I will help with this. I will help with that. Because the women that come in, that big picture of parenting is like, whoa, I can't do this.
Right.
Yes, you can, because you're going to have him.
Now talk a little bit. Last time we talked, you shared something that really surprised me.
Okay.
The average person that goes in and has an abortion is not an 18-year-old girl. It's someone who already has kids. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I don't know if average is the right word, but our biggest age category is 20 to 24.
Okay.
So we do have 14-year-olds.
All right.
Unfortunately, 14, 15, in the teens. And then we've had some older ones, 35, even older than that. But the average is 20 to 24. And every story you can imagine. I mean, it's just amazing. Some of them are having to do with the father. I don't know who the father is. He's not supportive. He's mean to me, that type of thing. He's
a jerk. He's in prison, whatever.
Yes,
right. Yeah.
Yes. Some of them just have to do with their plans. I'm in nursing school, or whatever it is, all sorts of different stories. And they can't seem to see being able to do both.
Gotcha.
And they really can. So that's what we try to show them is we're called the Resource Center. We have bazillions of resources for a lot of different things. And some of that there's a law that says if you're pregnant in school, that the school can't penalize you or make you not do thus and so. We show them that. A lot of different things like that. We have a lot of resources. But the average woman, some of them are heartbreaking stories. Some of them are just, this wasn't my plan.
Right. I've already got kids. I don't want any more kids.
Mm-hmm. We have women that come in that they don't want another one. They don't see how they can do it. Some of them are not valid to where they would need to abort, but they're real concerns. Others are like, well, I just don't want, that type of thing. So, you hear a lot of things.
So, Karen, I know that. So when I think of the church, the Bible says it's the body of Christ, and some churches are hands, some are knees, some are ankles. We all have different roles in the big picture of the gospel, and so when I look at other churches doing things differently than us, that doesn't bother me one bit. If other churches or pastors choose to criticize us, that doesn't bother me one bit either, because I'm a knee and you're a hand, and that's okay, and we're going to get along in heaven just fine, right? So there are a lot of, in that same kind of line of thinking, there are a lot of approaches to dealing with or to approaching this subject. And what do we do, right? And there are some, so I was at, when I was in grad school, I did a paper where I interviewed people who were what we would think of as polar opposites of Christians.
Okay.
So I tried to find people who would not want to have anything to do with Christians, and I interviewed them and asked them, will you just tell me why? Like what is it? And one of the folks I interviewed was the public relations director for Planned Parenthood in Denver.
Oh, wow.
So she was their statewide director of Planned Parenthood, their PR. And I tried to meet with the director, but he handed me her, which is fine. Or I don't remember if it was a he or she, but this young lady, I ended up meeting with her, and I drove in. Have you ever been out to where they're at?
Not in Denver.
So it's near the old Stapleton Airport.
Okay.
So it's kind of right. I mean, you can see Stapleton from this place, and it's got a huge wall around it, and it's got like fences on one side and a brick wall. And so as I drove in, there were protesters across the street. And so what they would do is they had these big, tall ladders that they would stand up on top of on the sidewalk. And they had megaphones, or they were yelling, shouting, so they could still project over the wall. So I as I'm driving in, I heard them yelling. And so I rolled my window down. I wanted to hear what they were saying. And they were yelling at me. And it, surprised me, right? And then I drove into the parking lot, and they continued it. And, they were yelling, you're not a man, calling me things like faggot and all, all this really like disgusting stuff, And so I went in, did the interview, came out. And as I was leaving, I stopped in front of them. I stopped my car and got out. And I'm not a small guy. And I know they were probably, I saw they were scared. They thought I'm going to, who knows what's this guy going to do? And I told them I'm a pastor, and I told them what I was doing. And I asked him, how effective do you think this is? And we talked about grace and the gospel. And the conversation did not go well. So I left. So I think about that in terms of our approach to anybody that's outside of the walls of Christianity, right? Like the last thing I want to do is shout over the wall and make people feel like garbage, because maybe that would change their mind in that moment, right? The protesting. Maybe it won't. Either way, I know that person is not going to go to that church and try and find Christ and grace and forgiveness and all that.
Right.
Like they're going to give that guy the middle finger, just like I felt like when they were yelling at me. Talk about that a little bit, about your thoughts on, because obviously your approach is different, right? And again, it's the body of Christ. Maybe God is telling some people to do that. And if he is, you're a knee and I'm an elbow, man. Like you don't have to email me or anything. Like we don't need to hear your comments. I get it. If God's telling you to do that, do it. But that's not your approach.
Right.
And that's one of the things I really love about what you guys do. So talk about your thoughts on that maybe, or you can just dismiss that whole question. I don't know. Maybe it's too volatile.
No, I agree as far as the knee and the elbow and all that. However, I think people are angry.
Mm.
And if we look at Christ, he was angry, but did he attack people?
Right.
I don't remember him ever attacking people. Even the Old Testament prophets, they like, what's his name that went and told David, you've done this, he told the story about the sheep and everything. He wasn't attacking him. He was telling the truth.
He was trying to bring him back home. He was trying to call him to repentance, right? Choose this day who you're going to serve, kind of thing.
Right. And so I think there's a place for like the Old Testament prophet, to stand and say, this is wrong.
Right.
But to attack somebody in anger, where does that get you?
Right.
It certainly doesn't bring them to heaven.
Mm.
And that's what I think about the story you told about that guy that had the 2 kids and decided, I'm going to shoot this abortion doctor because I'm going to save these lives. But where did that abortion doctor go?
Mm.
I mean, it's so sad. There's worse things than abortion, and that's going to hell.
Yes.
And so do we have the love and compassion to reach people no matter what they've done and no matter what they're doing?
What about his sons, his kids? They're growing up now without a dad.
Exactly.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. So I think there is a place for the truth. But as far as what we do, we just try to minister to every individual that comes in.
Mm.
The churches that are involved, we have churches that give financially quite a bit, and we have pastors that preach or don't preach. We kind of have it all over the board. We have church ambassadors that are involved or maybe not so involved.
Mm-hmm.
We have
one here, Sally.
Yeah,
Shout out to Sally.
That's right. We have volunteer. All of our advocates and our greeters and our parenting coaches are volunteer.
Okay.
So that's a big commitment.
That says a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. The advocates go through 8-hour class training plus the role play plus the, so they give, and then they give 3 to 4 hour blocks once a week for a year.
Mm.
So there's a lot of church people that are giving quite a bit to see what difference they can make, what impact they can make just by caring and loving for somebody else.
Mm.
So that's pretty cool. But then we do have people that go to the Capitol. Today they're voting on some bills, which is, that's a whole nother story. But we do have people that go to the Capitol.
Right.
And I noticed the last time when they were giving testimony, there were some people that were total Old Testament prophet. You're going to answer to God for this. And they're yelling at the senators or whatever. Well, that's true. But is that going to change what they're thinking about towards this bill and how they vote?
Right.
I don't know. Maybe some of them it will.
Maybe, yeah.
But then we also had others that just gave testimony as to what we do and how it helped women, how it helped men, So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but
I think you are. I think, again, the body of Christ is a body, and the way the body approaches even this, maybe God told those guys to say that. Who knows? I have found that truth without grace is a hammer.
Oh, yeah.
And so what those guys were yelling at me that day was there might have been some truth in some of the things they were saying. Not the hurtful comments toward me part, but anyway, but there was no grace. And so it's a hammer, and it just does harm.
And that's the challenge we all live with, balancing grace and truth. Christ did it perfectly, of course.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Most of us tend to fall one side or the other, but hopefully we're towards the middle instead of way over on one side or the other. Because grace without truth we don't want that either.
Right. It's meaningless.
Yeah.
Yeah. It means nothing. Yeah. It's a license to do whatever. And that's not what Jesus came and died for either.
Right.
So, yeah.
And I think people get a bee in their bonnet, so to speak. And, they choose that, okay, this is the one thing I'm going to be really upset about. Well, yes, but the two greatest commandments, love the Lord your God and love others.
Yeah.
And is that loving others? I love I went to the Jesus Revolution movie.
Right. Loved it. Yeah.
And then I watched a interview with Greg and Kathy Laurie, and they were paralleling the sexual revolution back then to the sexual revolution today, LGBTQ, right? All that. And the drugs then and now.
Yeah.
And you watch that movie and you see Chuck Smith just welcoming those hippies. So are we welcoming the transgender? I mean, my daughter's friend has a boy who wants to be a girl, and she let him go to church in a skirt. What did the church people, did they love him? Yeah, they probably went, oh, whoa,
Yeah.
But are they caring and loving him? And, there's just so many different things today that are wrong, and we get upset. But God, he has it all under control.
Right.
And we have to trust that. We have to trust his heart. And he had that his loving kindness. I mean, when I think of my story, I think, man, this is a love story. God has been so good to me and so kind and so gracious, and I don't deserve any of it. And that's how he feels about every person, no matter how confused they are and no matter how deceived they are. And there's a lot of deception.
Yes.
And so I think as Christians, we need to come back to that and really trust him and do what he's asked us to do, but make sure it's, like you said, with grace and truth.
That's good. So Diane and I, I've shared this in my pulpit, but never on the podcast. We have a daughter in heaven.
Oh.
And she passed. Diane lost her when she was our very first. So she's 32 now. She's in heaven, right? So we had been, and we were both 17 years old.
Okay.
And not ready to be parents, and she had a miscarriage, lost the baby. So it had been about 8 or 9 years since that had happened, and we were in Charleston, walking through the market downtown, just like it's like Estes Park, some tourists. They're selling pots and just T-shirts and whatever. Right? So we're walking, and this lady's sitting there reading a book called Tilly. Have you ever? Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard of it. And so we're, I'm looking at like her keychains and whatever she's selling, right? And she just tells me, you should read this book. And I was like, oh. And I had heard of the author. I'd read some of his other stuff. His name's Frank Peretti. And I had read some of his other stuff. And I said, okay, I'll buy it. I'll find it. So I found the book. Didn't really know what it was about. And it's about a woman who loses a child. Now, in this case, it's an abortion. She has an abortion. And she meets through like this supernatural, it's a fictional story. She gets to meet her daughter. And she asks her, what's your name? And the girl says, my mom never gave me a name. And as it turns out, it's her, right? She's 10 years old at this point. And I remember when we read that. So she names her Tilly, and it's a beautiful story. Anyway, very short. You can read it in an hour. When we read that, it had been 8 or 9 years. I collapsed. I bawled. I laid on the floor crying because I had not. Yeah, and it was not an abortion, but it was a loss that when it happened, lots of folks around us said, it's probably better. You're not really ready, And so Diane and I kind of looked at each other and said, well, maybe it was better. Maybe it was better for the kid. Maybe it was better for us. You rationalize and try and compartmentalize and whatever. And so, so now, 7, 8 years hindsight, Diane and I got to grieve this thing that we had stuffed and just kind of like
put it aside.
Yeah, you adrenalize past it and forget it. Try and do your best to move past it. So we asked, we prayed and said, Lord, what was our baby? And I felt like the Lord told us it was a girl. She's a girl. Not was a girl, is a girl. So we named her Selah. And so the other day I cried for her. You know what I mean? It's still like, it's a very emotional thing to think about, is that we have a daughter in heaven. Look forward to meeting her someday. But so I think there's a lot of people that have that life experience of stuffing and so are you familiar with the book?
Yes, and they actually made a movie.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah.
Talk about a tearjerker.
Oh, wow. We need to watch that then. It's called Tilly?
It's called Tilly.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we do is we do a memorial service for the babies that have been. And it's very touching, but it's so meaningful because we usually you pray and God shows you it's probably a boy or girl, so you get to name them, you know. And it's just so nice to have that release, I guess, and the affirmation, because, you know, even if the baby lived 8 weeks in the womb, it still was life. It was
Right.
still, you know, it's really difficult, but it's a very, I just keep thinking meaningful.
Yes,
it just means so much to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do that with the classes or the retreats or just one-on-one.
Oh, interesting.
And we allow people, you know, we
We're
have
gonna
little.
have to find that movie. Yeah, we'll watch it.
Yeah, it's really good.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever heard the phrase "my Korean age is"? Have you ever heard that?
No.
We were watching a Korean reality show. Okay, and this guy says, they asked him how old he was, and he says, "My Korean age is 44." It's like, what does that mean? So we Googled it, you know, as we're watching this show. Koreans count the day of conception.
Oh, that's cool.
Isn't that cool? And so he's like, my Korean age is 44, but you know, to you, I'm 43.
Huh.
But my Korean age is 44. And I thought that's
interesting.
That's a foundational, philosophical kind of way of looking at things that it's kind of a level setting for the culture.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you start saying my Korean age is 44, that means I was alive from day one.
Right.
That should affect everything else, which is really the fight right now in the United States, right? Is life begins at birth or conception, whatever. But
that's a great thing to teach the kids.
Yeah, my Korean age.
So then when they grow up, they know that, you know.
Yeah. I was alive and I was a person.
Right.
Back then, yeah.
Yeah. And I think the debate, you know, everybody knows it's a baby. The debate of whether it's a baby or alive is kind of past tense anymore. Now the debate is this women's reproductive rights, which, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Right.
That's
whole nother podcast. So
exactly.
2 more questions.
Okay.
One, I always ask everybody this. What does that word successful mean to you? Because, you know, 18-year-old Karen, right? In your mind, you wanted to be successful in life. And right, we all have this, you want to be a special ed teacher. And so what does that word successful mean to you? We have a lot of young leaders that watch this and they're trying to figure that out, what that means to them. And are you successful? How would you answer that?
Well, I think there's a couple of definitions. Worldly success is probably material goods,
right,
and achievements.
Mm-hmm.
But the real success is, you know, have I made an impact? Have I made a difference? Have I cared for and loved others well? And the verdict is still out.
I think I could probably chime into that a little bit. Yeah.
I mean, you know, we do as well as we can.
Mm-hmm.
We stumble and fall.
Sure.
But to get back up again and keep on keeping on is really important to persevere. I think that to answer your question, I hope I'm working on being more and more successful. As I age. That's an interesting thing because you think you're going to be invincible, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then you find out you're not.
Right.
But
even when you joke about your dad being 91, right? If I ever make it to 91, I'm going to be wanting to make it to 92. You know what I mean? Like
exactly.
we want to, yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's how you age too. Like my dad is an amazing man. Oh, my
Where does he
goodness.
live?
He has a winter summer, so Los Alamos.
course he
He's still
does.
there in this. He's still there in the summer, and then down at Port Isabel, which is South
Florida?
Padre Island. No,
that-
Texas.
Oh, okay.
Tip of Texas.
Mm.
So I would say he's definitely successful. He's done so well, and I think in all aspects. Not that he's been perfect by
Sure.
any means, but even if you're aging, I think we still think that, am I able? Able to what? Well,
Do what I want. Yeah.
do what I want, or able physically. But there's people that aren't able physically or in other ways that are just as successful.
For sure. Yeah.
So I think successful is really, am I living the life that God has asking me to live? And with what he brings into my life, what am I doing with that? Good, bad, or indifferent? Because he brings lots of things into our lives, and they're not all rosy.
That's true. I've experienced some of that.
Yeah. He totally blesses us, but he also gives us trials,
Sure.
and develops to help us develop the character and become more Christ-like. And so what have I done with that? And there are times I've just, temper tantrum with what?
Right.
But I think now I've learned enough to say, you are worthy to be praised no matter what. Help me to deal with this the way you want me to, and learn what I'm supposed to.
Yes.
And to be able to turn around and help others do the same, really.
That's good. So good.
So
last question. And we've been dancing all over this question this whole time, but where have you seen God in all of it?
Oh, yeah.
All of the journey of all of it.
It's amazing. So grateful. I remember in high school, we went down to my grandparents, and all the family was there, and it was kind of loud. And I went out on the front porch, and all my little teenage troubles, I was just sitting on the front porch, just kind of praying. And I looked up, and the heavens were like, it was just like this magnificent. And I felt like that was God saying, I see you. I know you. I love you. And several times since then, different things, God speaks our heart language, and but I think accepting his forgiveness was pretty huge, because I know other things have happened. I remember with our other son, not Russell, very sickly for a long time and almost died and all that. And I remember one time he was in the ER, and I couldn't call my friends that usually prayed. And I was like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I'm okay, well, I'm going to pray. Well, yes. I always did before, but I always relied on them.
Sure.
And God answered that prayer, and it was like, I see you. I heard your prayer. Not that you don't need those friends, because you do, right, but and so all throughout. If it was just
me and you, I hear you. Yes. Love that.
Yes. And so just that, and his loving kindness over and over and over, things that we don't deserve. Russell's turnaround was so many God.
If you haven't had a chance to listen to Russell's podcast, it's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. And there was a lot of God stuff going on there. Marriage is always a challenge. It's a blessing, but saying, okay, Lord, I'm going to stay married because you want me to stay married. And the things he has done and the way he has blessed that, and just following him and seeing his hand and following his hand I wouldn't want to live any other way. I just can't imagine living any other way. And you think, well, no wonder people are all confused up. If they don't have that, if they don't know that. But at the flip side of that is we can't expect them to be a certain way because they don't have that.
Right.
Therefore, that's why we need the grace and compassion and kindness towards them.
That's so good. Okay, I'm going to throw one more question in.
Okay.
If you could talk right now to 18-year-old Karen, and because she's listening 100%, someone forwarded this to her and she's listening, and she's either contemplating doing this or she's already done it. What would you say to her? Look into that camera right there. And she's watching. Yeah.
Well, if it's contemplating, I would say don't keep it a secret now. Ask for help. There's many people that would support and would help and would love and care, do love and care. And that the long-term consequences of living with the life or the death will get you. So choose life. And then if she's already done it, I would say the same thing. Don't keep it a secret. Get help now. Start the healing process. Don't be miserable for years because God is amazing and He's got you.
So good.
Yeah.
Karen, with that, we will wrap it up. Thank you so much for coming and joining us. I'll put all your contact info in the show notes.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Thank you.
This podcast is sponsored by Mosaic Church, a church for people who don't really like church. To learn more about Mosaic, please visit our website at greeleymosaic.com. Thank you for joining us today. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode.